How do we deal with ellipses and dashes when we're acting? A lot of times, first thing you think of is, oh, this is where I pause, or this is where I wait for the acting partner of mine to interrupt me. These are not helpful things to think about while we're acting. People don't do that. In life, you have a thought you're trying to finish, you have something you're trying to do, and then people interrupt you. I'll give you a couple examples here. This play is called Chinese Coffee. I've talked about it before. The situation is that there are two really good friends. Both of them are writers. One of them is about to publish a book, and he may or may not have used real life events from his friend to help dramatize the story. His friend is not keen on this idea. So they're having a bit of a war about whether or not the text is actually good. We don't know if the person whose life was stolen from him. Jake is the person whose life is being stolen in his estimation. He's saying that there's not really merit to this book that his friend wants to publish, and his friend thinks that he's lying to him. So there's this moment when they're going through it and he says, the damn thing is just crammed with raw ingredients, talking about the book. You start out with Greenwich Village sex and mayhem. Then you move into intimate, and I mean intimate, and devastating family passion. Then you move right back to Greenwich Village sex and mayhem. You'll load up financially and pay everybody back emotionally. Harry says, you don't mean that. Jake says, I mean it and know it to be true. Harry says, so you mean to say, ... that you actually think ... that this time ... with this thing ... I might actually ... make a little money. So if you are looking at ... as pauses, this is probably how you'll work on this scene. So you mean to say that you might actually think that this time with this thing, I might actually make a little money? That is not a great way of working on this. Acting is not trying to think of interesting ways to say lines. Acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. The foundation of truthful acting is the reality of doing. What is Harry, who has these ellipses in his lines, saying and doing with this particular moment? He's listening to what Jake is saying about his book, and what he's picking up on is saying, you'll load up financially and pay everybody back emotionally. And he's like, you think I'm going to make money on this? Jake, up to this point, has made it very clear he doesn't think that this thing could make money. He doesn't think that this thing is artistically good. He doesn't think that it's worth pursuing whatsoever. But Harry hears something in his recent response, and he hones in on it because he thinks Jake is dishonest about the merit of his work. These ... are moments to do something. Every time you see a ... look at it as something the character is doing. A little bitty activity, a little bitty thing, a little piece of behavior, and try to get it specifically down to what exactly they're doing. That's part of your choice. It has to be supported by the text. It has to make sense within the context of the scene, of course. But what are you doing if you're playing Harry in these moments? You could be teasing Jake, figuratively nailing him to the wall, exposing his lie, belittling him, augmenting the truth based on what he's saying. There's a million things you could do. It's in your choice. If you read further, after he says, I might actually make a little money, Jake says, ... it's possible. Now, if you're playing Jake and you have a ... what do you do with that ... What is Jake doing in that moment? Is he weighing the possibility of him making money? Is he contemplating whether or not to fuel his ego in that moment, setting him up for disappointment later? Is he manipulating him? There's a million things you could do. Make a choice, but do not let it be a pause for no reason. Sanford Meisner said something I think is pretty brilliant. He said, silence is an absence of sound, but it's not an absence of meaning. Every moment has a meaning all its own, and every activity has three elements: difficulty, urgency, and meaning. What's the meaning of this particular moment? It's based on what you do. That's something you can choose. You can choose that. Now, it may come out of you in a totally different way when you're actually up there in the moment, acting in the scene, but you're always actively doing something because that's the foundation of truthful acting. Let's look at another example real quick. Streetcar Named Desire. In this play, Blanche shows up to the Kowalskis' apartment. They don't live in the best place, and where Blanche and Stella, her sister, come from is more aristocratic. It's higher class. And they were set to inherit this land called Belle Reve. And it's this amazing land with this great house, and it's very, very valuable. But Stella is told by Blanche that she lost Belle Reve, and that bothers Stanley because he wants a piece of that ownership, and he wants to know what happened because he thinks that Blanche has sold the property and profited without telling Stella because he doesn't trust Blanche. So when Stanley says, "Where's the papers?" meaning the bill of sale, where's the papers that show that you lost this land or it was sold or something? And she says, "Everything that I own is in that trunk. It's full of clothes, it's full of furs, it's full of a lot of things." Stanley crosses to the trunk, shoves it roughly open, and begins to open compartments. She says, "What in the name of heaven are you thinking of? What's in the back of that little boy's mind of yours? That I am absconding with something, attempting some kind of treachery on my sister? Let me do that. It will be faster and simpler, ... I keep my papers mostly in this tin box." So what's she doing with the ... She's not just pausing. Now the stage direction gives you a little hint. It says she crosses to the trunk and takes out a box. So she basically says, "Let me do that. It will be faster and simpler." She does it herself. He's going through her trunk and she's like, stop, let me do it. So the ... is an opportunity for the actor playing Blanche to actually go through her tin box of documents and prove to him, "I'm not lying to you." Let's look at another piece. Later on in the play, things have gotten a lot worse between the three of them, and Stanley and Blanche are having more and more issues where the trust is just totally shattered. And they are sitting at Blanche's birthday dinner, and her beau, Mitch, is supposed to be there, but he's not coming because Stanley's informed Mitch that Blanche isn't who she says she is. And it turns Mitch off to the idea of maybe them dating any longer. So at the beginning, Blanche says, "Stanley, tell us a joke. Tell us a funny story to make us all laugh. I don't know what's the matter. We're all so solemn. Is it because I've been stood up by my beau?" I'll kind of zoom past a few of these lines and I'll go to the part where there's the ellipses. "I don't know any refined enough for your taste." Stanley talking about stories. She says, "Well, then let me tell one." Stella, her sister, says, "Yes, you tell one, Blanche. You used to know lots of good stories." Blanche says, "Let me see now. ... I must run through my repertoire. Oh yes, I love parrot stories. What do you do with this ... It's not a moment to pause. It's a moment where Blanche is doing something. So if you're playing Blanche, what are you doing? Most likely, you're searching through and trying to find a story that you know that's funny, that will make the room a little bit lighter, that will take the attention off of the vacant seat that was supposed to be occupied by her love interest. And the elephant in the room is something that's making her very uncomfortable, so she wants to lighten the mood. So she's searching for a way to lighten the mood, which is going to happen through telling this story. So look for a story in this moment. Let's go to the last example here. Beyond the Horizon, great play. Now in this play, there's actually not a lot of ellipses, but there are a lot of dashes. So I want to isolate one of the dashes and kind of go through why this might be a similar situation. What do you do? Just wait to be interrupted? No. In this particular part of the story, Ruth and Robert are well into their union, and they are together, and they have a daughter, and they live on a farm, and it's not going well. And Robert was set to travel the world and go beyond the horizon, but love kept him where he is today, and now he's with Ruth. Ruth and him fell in love, but the practicality of their union is not working out. And Ruth is starting to long for the presence of Robert's brother, Andy, who was really good on the farm and would have probably provided a much better living, a much better life as a farmer on this land for their kids, or their kid in this situation. But Andy and Robert swapped places at the beginning of the play, and now Andy has been traveling the world in Robert's place. Ruth is saying, "I suppose you're sorry now that you didn't go, now that you didn't leave." And Robert says, "Oh, those cursed hills out there that I used to think promised me so much. How I've grown to hate the sight of them. They're like the walls of a narrow prison yard, shutting me in from all the freedom and wonder of life. Sometimes I think if it wasn't for you, Ruth, and little Mary, I'd chuck everything up and walk down the road with just one desire in my heart, to put the whole rim of the world between me and those hills and be able to breathe freely once more. There I go dreaming again, my old fool dreams. Ruth, you're not the only one. Robert, and Andy, who's had the chance, what has he got out of it? His letters read like the diary of a farmer. We're in Singapore now. It's a dirty hole of a place and hotter than hell. 2 of the crew are down with fever and we're short-handed on the work. I'll be damn glad when we sail again, although tacking back and forth in these blistering seas is rotten job too. That's about the way he summed up his impressions of the East. Ruth says, you needn't make fun of Andy. Again, she's developing these feelings for Andy. Robert says, when I think, but what's the use? You know I wasn't making fun of Andy personally, but his attitude toward things is ... Ruth, her eyes flashing, bursting into uncontrollable rage. You was too making fun of him, and I ain't going to stand for it. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. If you're playing Robert and you come upon this line, you know I wasn't making fun of Andy personally, but his attitude toward things is... You need to have a finished thought. You need to know what you're doing with that line, and you need to do it with reality. So I hope that sums up what to do with ellipses and dashes, and follow for more acting tips like this one.